All right, let's talk about a huge idea, one that pretty much shapes the world around us, democracy. But what does that word actually mean? And more importantly, what's it got to do with you? Let's dive in.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about it? Who gets to decide stuff like where new roads are built or what rules we all have to follow? It's a pretty big question, right?
Well, in a democracy, the answer is actually really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. The answer is the people. It's all of us, the log. And this building you see here, that's India's parliament. We call it our temple of democracy, because this is where the people's power really comes to life.
You know, the word itself gives us a massive clue about its meaning. It actually comes all the way from ancient Greece. You've got demos, which means the people, and kratia, which means power or rule. So you stick those two words together, and what do you get?
Power of the people. It's that simple. It's a whole system where we, the citizens, hold the ultimate power. And here in India, we've got our own beautiful word for it, Loktantra. See, Lok means people, and Tantra means system, the system of the people.
You've probably heard this famous quote from the American president Abraham Lincoln. He gave maybe the clearest definition ever. He said it's a government of the people, which means it comes from us. By the people, meaning we're the ones who run it. And for the people, meaning it's supposed to work for the good of everyone.
Okay, but that brings up a really good question. If everyone's in charge, how does anything actually get done? Just imagine trying to get millions and millions of people to agree on what to order for pizza. It'd be chaos. So, how does it work?
Well, we can basically split democracy into two main types. Think of it like two different paths for the people's power to flow.
First, you've got direct democracy. Now, this is where every single person votes on every single law. Imagine that. It kind of worked for really small places, like the ancient city of Athens. But for a massive country like India, no way. That's why we have the second type, indirect democracy, or what we usually call representative democracy. And this is the system we use.
So in our system, the key idea is that we choose leaders to represent us. These are our pratinidhi. We vote for them, and their job is to go to places like Parliament and be our voice, making the big decisions for us.
All right, so we get what democracy is, and we know there are a couple of types. But what actually makes one work, what makes it healthy? I like to think of it like a recipe. You need a few key ingredients to get it just right. Let's check them out.
First, and this is a big one, you need free and fair elections. This is how we choose our leaders, and just as important, it's how we can vote them out peacefully if they aren't doing a good job. Next, you need active citizens, the Janatha. Yep, that's us. We have to show up and get involved. Then, of course, protected rights. Basic stuff, like being able to speak your mind, has to be totally safe. And finally, the rule of law. This one is absolutely critical. It just means that the law, the Kanun, is the boss. It applies to everyone equally, no exceptions.
So when you put all of that together, the elections, the active people, the protected rights, and the rule of law, what do you get? You get a system that's built from the ground up to make sure the power stays right where it started, with the people.
Okay, so why does any of this matter to you? I mean, really. It might sound like something from a civics book, but it's not. This is about your daily life, your community, and your entire future. See, in a democracy, you're not just sitting on the sidelines. You get the power to help pick your leaders. You have the freedom to speak up and share your ideas. You have the right to be treated the same as everyone else. But here's the thing. With all that power comes a big responsibility to actually take part. There's a great saying, democracy is not a spectator sport. You can't just watch it happen. You have to be in the game. It's a system that's built on your voice, your choices, and your actions. So the real question at the end of the day isn't just, what is democracy? The real question is for you. How are you going to use your power?
Hey there and welcome. Today we're tackling a really big question. When it comes to making the rules for everyone, who actually holds the power? Is it us, the people, making every decision ourselves, or is it the leaders we pick? Let's jump in and explore the two sides of this coin, direct versus indirect democracy. So just think about it for a second. When you and your friends are trying to figure something out, like which game to play or what to do, how do you decide? You probably all talk it over. Maybe you vote, right? The point is, everybody gets a say. Well, that super simple idea is actually at the very core of how entire countries can make decisions.
Okay, first up, let's talk about a system where the power is quite literally in the hands of every single person.
This is what we call direct democracy, or in Hindi it's known as Pratyaksha Loktantra.
Now, this whole idea isn't new at all. In fact, it's ancient. It goes way back to the city-states of ancient Greece, places like Athens. See, back then, their territories were smaller, and they had fewer people. So it was actually possible for all the citizens to just gather in one place, talk things out, and vote. Can you even imagine trying to do that today?
So what exactly is it? Well, direct democracy, or Pratyaksha Loktantra, is a system where all citizens directly take part in running the whole show. There are no middlemen, no go-betweens. Everyone is involved in making the laws, deciding on policies, and even carrying them out.
So, how would this work in the real world? Well, picture this. Imagine if everyone in your entire school got to vote on every single rule. I mean, everything, from what's on the lunch menu to how long recess should be. Everyone gets a voice on every issue. People talk it over, and whatever the majority decides becomes the new rule. The famous philosopher Aristotle put it perfectly. He called it a system where all command each, and each in turn all.
Okay, so while a pure 100% direct democracy is pretty rare these days, its spirit is definitely alive and well. It exists through some really powerful tools that regular citizens can use. Let's call it the People's Toolkit, or in Hindi, Janta Ke Adhikar.
The first tool in this kit is called a referendum, or Janmata Sangra. Now, this is when a law that's already been passed by the government gets sent back to the people for the final say. It's basically a massive countrywide yes or no vote.
Here's a really easy way to get it. Let's say your school principal decides everyone needs a new uniform, and the design is, well, let's just say it's interesting. With a referendum, every single student from the first grade to the last would get a vote to say yes, we want it, or no way. The majority wins, and that is the final call.
The process itself is pretty simple. A new law or rule is put forward by the lawmakers. But before it becomes official, it's handed over to the public for a vote. Everyone casts their ballot, and whatever the majority wants, well, that's what happens. It's a really powerful way for the people to have the last word.
All right, our next tool is called the initiative, or Pahel. Now this one kind of flips the whole thing on its head. Instead of just voting yes or no on a law that the government already made, the initiative lets citizens like you and me actually propose a brand new law from scratch.
Think about how cool this is. What if you and your friends could actually start a petition for a new school rule? No homework on Fridays. And if you got enough support, that proposal would then go up for a vote by the entire school. That's an initiative. It's power that starts from the ground up.
And the last tool we're going to look at is the recall, or Vapas Balana. This one's all about keeping people accountable. It's a way for voters to actually remove an elected official from their job if they feel that person isn't doing what they promised. So, how does a recall work? Well, if enough people feel that the person they elected is being irresponsible or just not listening to them, they can start a campaign to gather support from other voters. And if they get enough support, that official can be removed from office, even before their term is supposed to end. It sends a really clear message from the voters, hey, you work for us.
So we've seen how people can have power directly. But what happens when there are just way too many people to all vote on everything? Well, that brings us to the other system, which is actually much more common today. It's all about choosing a champion to speak for you. This is indirect democracy, or Apratyaksha Loktantra.
So, indirect democracy is a system where citizens don't vote on every single law themselves. Instead, they vote to elect representatives, people they trust to make those big decisions for them. These elected officials then go to the government and act on behalf of the people who voted them in.
Now, this is probably the system that sounds most familiar to you. Through regular elections, people choose who they want to represent them. The main job of these representatives is to be the voice for their communities, to fight for what they need and want. So in a way, the people are still governing, but they're doing it through their chosen champions. And that's exactly why it's also called representative democracy.
So we've got these two really different ways of thinking about how power works. Let's put them right next to each other and really break down the key differences between Pratyaksha democracy and Apratyaksha democracy.
This chart really lays it all out, doesn't it? The biggest difference, the one that changes everything, is who is using the power. In direct democracy, the power is with you personally. In indirect democracy, it's with the person you vote for. And because of that, a direct system really only works in a small place where everyone can be involved all the time. But a system with representatives is designed for huge countries, where, for most people, participation really just means voting on election day.
And all this brings us to a super important question. If direct democracy gives people so much personal power, why on earth do most countries in the world use an indirect system? Let's take a look at the modern reality, or Aaj ki Sachai.
So let's really chew on that for a second. Why would we hand over our power to someone else when, theoretically, we could keep it for ourselves? Why is true direct democracy so rare? Well, it all boils down to a few major practical problems.
The answer really is all about practicality. Just try to imagine getting every single person in a massive city like Mumbai or New York into one room to decide what to have for lunch. It's just impossible, right? With millions of people spread across huge countries, it's just not realistic for everyone to get together and vote on every single complicated issue, from healthcare to the national budget. So here's the bottom line. While direct democracy is a really powerful and amazing idea, indirect democracy is what makes it possible for huge, complex countries to actually work. You simply can't have millions of people debating every single detail of a new law, so instead, you elect representatives who can become experts and make informed choices for all of us.
And that leads us to one final big idea to think about. In a world with smartphones and the internet, where we can communicate instantly, could technology break down those old barriers of size and distance? Could we one day live in a world where millions of people vote on laws directly from their phones? It's a fascinating question about where power might be headed next. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.
चलिए समझते हैं. Welcome everyone. Today we're diving into the absolute biggest, most important game in the entire world. Seriously, it's a game that decides exactly how our towns, our schools, and our entire country are run. In today's special explainer, we're going to break down the rules, the superpowers, and yeah, even the hidden glitches of a system called democracy, or as we call it in Hindi, Loktantra. Okay, let's dive right into this.
So think about this for a second. Who do you really think is the most powerful person in the country? Is it a king, a superhero, maybe the president? Well, the answer might actually surprise you. In Loktantra, the ultimate power doesn't sit with a king or a queen on a throne. It sits with everyday people. It sits with your parents, your teachers, and you know what? One day, it's going to sit with you through your vote. That's right, your voice is literally the most powerful tool in this whole system. So let's open up the blueprint and look at Section 1, the core rules, or the niyam.
The rule number 1 is popular sovereignty, or in Hindi, Janta ki Samprabhuta. Now, Samprabhuta is a pretty heavy word, but it simply means having the absolute right to make your own decisions. It means the public is the real boss. The government isn't some separate, scary monster or a super strict principle. It exists for one reason and one reason only, to serve the people's needs. The leaders are just your representatives, chosen to do your work.
Rule number 2 is the rule of law, or Kanun ka Shasan. This means that the government must function strictly according to a constitution. Think of the constitution as the ultimate rulebook of a giant board game. Even the biggest, most powerful leaders have to follow it. Just like a school principal still has to follow the school timings, right? In democracy, nobody is allowed to cheat, and absolutely nobody is above the rules.
Building on that, we have 3 more massive pillars. First is liberty, which means azadi. In this game, you have the azadi to speak your mind, and you're even allowed to point out if you think the boss is doing a terrible job. Then there's equality, or samanata. This means every single person gets exactly one vote. Rich or poor, CEO or farmer, everyone's voice carries the exact same weight. Finally, majority rule, or bahumat. When deciding what to do, we simply go with what the highest number of people want.
All of these foundational rules combined, azadi, samanata, bahumat, they serve one absolutely crucial purpose. They guarantee that the government's policies actually reflect what the people wish for. It's not about what the leaders want to do. It's entirely about what you want. All right, so we know the rules. Let's move on to Section 2, Democracy's Superpowers, or its QBN.
Democracy has some seriously amazing superpowers. First off, it recognizes the worth of every single individual. It treats everyone equally in the eyes of the law. It protects your freedom, meaning nobody can force you to do something against your will. It also aims for the welfare of all people, not just a small, wealthy group. And here is a real superpower. If the citizens don't like the government, they can change it peacefully through voting. They don't need to fight or start a violent revolution. The voting box is basically their magic wand.
Another fantastic feature is its educative value, or the Sikh. Our source text actually calls democracy a large-scale experiment in public education. By simply taking part in the game, by voting, reading the news, and discussing the country's issues, people automatically learn. It acts as a massive training ground for patriotism, self-reliance, and responsibility. Ultimately, this system teaches us the art of living together. It encourages a real feeling of brotherhood. It forces individuals to step outside of their own selfish bubbles, their swarth, to rise above self-interest and think about what is best for the whole country. It helps us become enlightened citizens, or Jagrik Nagrik.
These strengths are exactly why this system is so wildly popular globally. The constant check of elections ensures high efficiency. Why? Well, because the leaders know they are responsible to you. If they don't do a good job, you're simply going to vote them out in the very next round of the game.
But wait, let's just pause for a second here. We've talked about all these amazing superpowers, but kya loktantra ekdam perfect hai? Is democracy absolutely perfect? Well, just like any game out there, it has its flaws. Let's neutrally explore what the critics have to say about it.
This is where things get really fascinating. Remember how we just said democracy educates people? Well, critics look at that exact same system completely differently. They worry about something called the cult of incompetence. In simple Hindi, you can think of this as ayogya logon ka prabhav, giving power to people who just aren't qualified. Critics argue that because everyone gets a vote, power might be handed to politicians who are just really good at telling appealing lies, rather than people who have the actual skills, knowledge, and education to run a complex country.
So, let's look under the hood. Section 3. The hidden glitches, or the Kamiyan.
Some critics use some really strong words here. They've actually called democracy government by fools and worry a lot about the tyranny of the majority, or Bahamat ki tanashahai. Their big concern is that democracy gives way too much importance to mere quantity, just who has the most numbers rather than quality, meaning who actually has the most knowledge.
Let's break down that despotism of the majority, or Bahumat ki Tanashahi. Imagine you're out on a playground with 10 kids. 6 kids want to play cricket, and 4 want to play football. Because of majority rule, they play cricket, and hey, that's fair. But the glitch happens if those 6 kids start bullying the 4, or completely block them from the field just because they have more numbers. The majority must always still protect and respect the rights of the minority.
Our sources outline some other glitches too. Equality can sometimes turn into mob rule, or B-tantra, where an angry, unthinking crowd makes decisions instead of calm, carefully written laws. It's also incredibly expensive. Holding massive elections costs crores of rupees, which can unfortunately lead to bribery and Bhrashtachar, meaning corruption. Also, because democracy requires endless debates and discussions, it can be very slow, which is definitely scary during fast-moving emergencies or wars. Finally, if leaders keep changing sides, the government becomes highly unstable or austere.
And one of these saddest glitches pointed out by critics is this. Because party politics can become so incredibly dirty and corrupt, truly worthy and competent people often just refuse to enter the game at all. They don't want any part of it. This leaves voters having to choose between inefficient and undesirable candidates.
So, we've seen the rules, we've explored the superpowers, and we've uncovered the glitches. What's the final score? Welcome to Section 4, the final verdict, or the Nishkarsh. Despite all those glitches we just talked about, the slowness, the expense, the risks, democracy stands firmly on the principle of tolerance, or sahanshilta. It is the only system that truly allows a plurality of ideas, meaning many different thoughts, voices, and beliefs, to exist side by side peacefully. It has built-in shields so that even if you are in that minority on the playground, your basic rights are still completely safe.
But here is the ultimate secret to Loktantra. The game is really only as good as its players. As our source reminds us, it requires us to rise above self-interest. It requires us to become Jagruk Nagrik, enlightened citizens. The rules are there, but they only work if the people playing the game are smart, fair, and active.
Which brings it all right back to you. The entire system relies on education, fairness, and your participation. You hold the ultimate power. So the question I want to leave you with today is this. Are you ready to learn, to care for others, and to be a smart, active citizen in the great game of Loktantra? Think about it. Thanks for exploring this amazing system with me today, and keep learning.
Welcome, everyone. Let's dive right into today's explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept, the building blocks of democracy, or as we say in Hindi, Loktantra ke Nirman Khand. Think about it like this. मान लीजिए हम सब देश के निर्माता हैं. We are the builders of our nation, and together we have to build a really strong house. This house is our society, our country. And to make sure this house stands tall against any storm, we need some very specific, incredibly strong building blocks.
So here is a question for you. बच्चों, एक सफल लोकतंत्र के लिए क्या जरूरी है? Kids, what does it actually take to make a democracy successful? It sounds like a simple question, but the answer goes pretty deep. We hear the word democracy all the time, right? A government of the people, by the people. But it doesn't just work by magic. It requires certain conditions, rules, and honestly, certain behaviors from all of us to actually function. Let's find out what those are.
Here is a quick look at what we're covering today. We'll explore Loktantra kya hai, Janata ki taqat, Zaruri suvidain, Ek nidar media, Hamare rakshak, and finally, Aapki bhumika.
Now, you might be wondering where we are getting all these big ideas from. Aaj ka hamara gyan kahan se aa raha hai? Well, it is straight out of a Class 12 political science textbook, so our source is completely authentic. And hey, if you're thinking, whoa, Class 12? That's way too advanced. Don't worry at all. We are going to break it all down and make it super easy and fun to understand.
Let's kick things off with our first section, Janata ki taqat, the true foundation of democracy.
The absolute first condition for a successful democracy is that the public actually has to want it. Even if a king or a dictator is doing a supposedly good job, it's never better than the people ruling themselves. And to protect this power, we need something called eternal vigilance. Hamesha jagruk rehna. It's kind of like how a class monitor always has to stay alert. We need to keep a close watch on the government's every single move. Agar hum aalsi ho gaye, if we get lazy, that power will slip into the hands of a few, which is super dangerous for the country. So staying awake and aware, that's literally your superpower.
Another massive rule for democracy is the spirit of tolerance, yani bhaichara. This mutual tolerance is the absolute bedrock of the whole system. Imagine you're playing a game with your friends. You aren't always going to agree on the rules, right? In a democracy, the minority, the smaller group, has to tolerate the rule of the majority. But, and this is just as important, the majority must tolerate healthy criticism from the minority. हमें भेदभाव से ऊपर उठकर एक दूसरे की आलोचना को स्वीकार करना सीखना होगा. This bhaichara is exactly what keeps our democratic house from crumbling from the inside.
Moving right along to Section 2, Zaruri suvidain, focusing on education and the economy, because just wanting a democracy isn't enough. You need the right tools to participate in it. The famous thinker J.S. Mill made a really great point about this. He said that before you give someone the right to vote, they need to be educated. It makes total sense, right? जैसे बिना सीखे आप गाड़ी नहीं चला सकते. You wouldn't drive a car without learning how. So step 1 is education. Step 2 is understanding the actual value of your vote. And only then, step 3, giving the right to vote. If citizens aren't educated, they just can't make informed choices for the country's future.
And that brings us to a really powerful quote from Professor Lasky. He said, "A hungry man knows no democracy." Think about it, bachcho. If you are starving, if a person doesn't have basic food, clothes, or shelter, are they going to care about public affairs or fair play? बिल्कुल नहीं. पेट भरा होगा तभी तो देश के बारे में सोच पाएंगे. Without basic economic security, people are just trying to survive. That's why a strong economy is an absolutely necessary building block. Next up is Section 3, Ik Nidar Media, a free and fearless press. Think of this as the big windows in our democratic house, letting all the light in. Why is a good, fearless media so crucial for a democracy? Well, it does 3 main things. First, it educates the people, keeping everyone informed. Second, it exposes any arbitrary or unfair government actions. Sarkar ki galatiyan dikhana is super important. And third, it encourages independent and critical thinking. A truly free press doesn't just tell you what to think, it hands you the facts so you can use your own brain to figure out what's right and wrong. This brings us to Section 4, Rakshak, the guardians of our democracy, namely our leaders and our constitution.
Agar neta bura ho, to kya hoga? What actually happens to a country if its leader is bad? Because millions of people can't manage daily public affairs all at once, we have to choose leaders. And the difference is huge. Ek acha neta sabko jodta hai. A good leader unites the people through strength, ability, and honesty. On the flip side, a bad leader divides them. Our entire democracy relies on finding leaders who want to pull the country forward together,
not tear it apart. But hey, even the very best leaders need a rulebook. That's our Constitution. Sir Henry Maine had a brilliant analogy for this. He said that a wise constitution is like a strong dam. जैसे एक मजबूत बांध तूफान और बाढ़ को रोककर पानी को शांत झील में बदल देता है, our Constitution takes the noisy turbulence of democracy and makes it calm and safe. It secures our liberties while putting strict limits on what the government can do. It's basically the ultimate safety net for our house. And finally, we reach the most important section. Aapki bhumika, your role in democracy. We've talked about education, bhaichara, a fearless media, and the Constitution. But honestly, none of this works unless you, the future builders, do your part. So I have to ask, are you ready to be a tolerant and vigilant citizen? क्या आप आज से ही जागरूक बनने के लिए तैयार हैं? Democracy is way more than just a chapter in a textbook. It starts right now in how you treat your classmates and how aware you are of the world around you. You are the future guardians of this incredible democratic house. Thanks so much for joining today's Explainer. Keep learning, stay alert, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to the Explainer. So picture this. It's 1950, and against all odds, India steps onto the world stage as a secular, democratic republic.